Hello, this is Dan Ferrisi, Editor-in-Chief of Commercial Integrator, and welcome to AV Plus, the podcast for the commercial AV integration industry. This week, we're very fortunate to be joined by Mark Coxon, who is Business Development Director with XTG, which is a group within AVI-SPL. He's going to be talking about all things experiential AV, the whole idea of AV integrators being storytellers and memory makers and smile generators, and how we can go beyond just the conceptual notions of those things and actually bring them to fruition for our clients and for our industry. Again, welcome to AV Plus, and I hope you enjoy this conversation.
As always, please like and subscribe to our YouTube page. And please subscribe to the AV Plus podcast on Apple and on Spotify.
So happy to be joined by Mark Coxon, who is Business Development Director of XTG. Thank you so much for joining me, Mark. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the pod.
No, I'm excited. I'm excited to do this. I haven't been on one of these before, so this is great.
Well, again, I appreciate you being here, and we're going to be talking about a very exciting topic, which I know you know a whole lot about, which is experiential AV, the whole idea of taking the commercial AV industry, the pro AV industry, and focusing on the experiences we create, the memories we make, the stories we tell, the smiles that we generate, that it's a whole lot more than hardware and software and pulling cable. Before we dive into all that really stimulating and interesting stuff, though, I do want to not bury the lead. You have had some career transition just in the past couple of weeks. When I interviewed you for the Digital Signage Deep Dive, you were working at HD Distributing. Just a few weeks ago, though, you announced your new home with XTG. Do you want to talk a little bit about your own career evolution and kind of what drew you to XTG?
Yeah, I love audio video. I started in audio video and residential, so I've kind of been on the residential side of the ball. After about 7 years in residential, the housing market fell to pieces, and I had to find a new way to make a living in that world. And that led me to a company I worked for in California called Mad Systems, which was kind of a museum experiential type commercial integrator that did a lot of visitor center and museum type work. And that was really kind of my first foray into commercial, but also into more of an experiential kind of company that did exhibits and visitor centers and things like that. I really like working closer with the end client because I think I'm really good when I'm sitting across from the person that's actually trying to solve a problem, right? So when I get to sit at the desk across from a person who says, hey, I have this story I want to tell, or I have this problem I'm trying to solve, I do really well in that environment. And so although I've been on the manufacturer and distributor side for a few years during my career, and I've worked with some amazing people, don't get me wrong, I really feel like that keeps me 1 or 2 steps away from the project as more of a fulfillment product arm as opposed to a problem solver. And so when I got this chance to come over to XTG, which is the Experience Technology Group within AVI-SPL, I was like, wow, that really seems like it aligns with my passions and my skill sets and really where I add the most value. For me, it's interesting because I really like to add value in the process, right? Like I don't know if it's because I started in residential and homes are such a personal thing, but I bond with clients. I just do personally. And I take it as a personal insult if like we don't fulfill what we said. And so I get an emotional fulfillment, out of being on the side where I can actually help somebody accomplish a goal. So super excited to be back on that side of the ball and not just on the product side.
Totally. I mean, emotional fulfillment actually resonates very much with what we're talking about here, because if we're talking about experiential, we're talking about engaging people's emotions, engaging their sense of wonder. And it sounds like, when you go to work each day, you have the opportunity to engage your own sense of wonder, your own sense of excitement, your own sense of interpersonal partnership, things of that nature. So it must be super fulfilling.
It is. It's funny because, we talk about origin stories in AV a lot, and like that a lot of people accidentally end up in the audiovisual industry, which was me. I mean, I was going to school for zoology. I loved classes on animal behavior and primatology and watching videos of baboons and how they interact in a troop and all of these type of things, right? And I never thought I was going to work in technology. And interestingly enough, I think my affinity for people and my interest in kind of like the innate way that we physiologically respond to the environment, I think has really given me this great platform for experiential, because I think a lot more about the people entering a space than I do about the technology delivering the experience. And I think, I don't think we have a lot of that in the industry. Sometimes we drive technology first and think experience second. So it's been a weird road for me, but I'm feeling like my past experiences in education are actually aligning really well for this phase of my career.
So let's talk now about experiential AV and how it aligns both with your career and with your vision, as well as with the industry broadly. As you say, we as an industry, I think, have drifted very much from focusing solely on the technology, solely on pulling the cable, and starting to focus a whole lot more on the experiences that we're helping to create and to cultivate. One major guidepost, I would argue, is when Infocom International became AVIXA, specifically so that they could underscore that our industry is centered on creating integrated experience, not just installing boxes. Drawing on your own background, which you've kind of gotten into, residential education, things of that nature, when would you say that you came to embrace the experiential angle? When you came to view it through the eyes of, I'm not a technology integrator or a technology partner, I'm a storyteller, or at least a contributor to storytelling?
I think the first time that I caught the bug, like the experiential bug, like the first project that I worked on, or my kind of first exposure to it, I was working with a master planned community development company, and they were building a visitor center. And this visitor center was for this new master plan community that they were building out in Arizona. And there were multiple home builders that were building homes in there, but what they had was this welcome center. And the Welcome Center, had a theater where you came in and you sat down and you watched a video about the type of community they're building and the space and the natural elements and kind of the history of the area. And then as you walked through the community center, there were different things about the amenities and all these pieces. And I worked on a project in a room that the room was actually kind of an oval. And what they wanted to do was create about a 25-foot arc of video in a curve around this oval. So the actual the curve itself isn't consistent in an oval. So that's a challenge in itself, right? Trying to get displays to come up. This was in a world of plasma televisions. So, you've had these really, really heavy, they were flat and fairly thin, but they were heavy. You had to get them on the wall. And so you had to kind of create this faceted curve around the room. And then I had to figure out how to get content across that curve, right? And so it was kind of my first foray into figuring out kind of what that whole ecosystem was about, how you fabricate something, how you actually work with a content developer, and then how you put the system up on the wall and support it. And so I think I first caught the bug when I did that center, because I had to figure all that out on my own. And there were some missteps, like anybody who started a new or explored a new vertical or a new area of their industry always kind of has those things, right? So, I think it was the first time I really got fooled by marketing specs on products, where the product, once it arrived, did not do what the paper said it did, right? And then I had to figure out, well, what product actually does this? So I caught it there. I think it was fanned at Mad Systems quite a bit. I loved going to museums and seeing new exhibits and things like that as well. But I think I first caught it in residential, which was a weird place to catch it, but I just happened to work on a project that was very experiential. So.
And yeah, I've had some interaction with Mad Systems over my career, and I know that you probably got a lot of that experiential enthusiasm from Maris and Trisha. I know that they live that kind of thing every day, so that totally aligns with my understanding of Mad. So I can understand that being part of it as well. So let's put some meat on the bones of experiential. You talked about one particular application there, but when we think about the verticals in the commercial industry, for example, thinking about corporate, about education, government, some of the more traditional ones, and then the ones that might be more full-on experientialism, like retail environments and attractions, what would be your vision of making those kind of verticals and those spaces experiential? Let's move beyond kind of the conceptual notions and figure out how it actually is implemented in the real world. How do you implement experientialism?
So this is an interesting piece for me, because, and one of the reasons I joined XTG and why I'm happy to be back doing this work, is that over the last few years, the world has changed, right? Like we all know that the world has changed, things have shifted a little bit. And I think in the past, people saw experiential in a way as a luxury, right? So there was a little bit of this idea that, creating a great experience was nice, but that was for Google and Facebook or a museum or a visitor center. That wasn't for my office. That wasn't for my company. That wasn't for my school. We're a very traditional business institution, et cetera. And we have this kind of, set way that we've done this over time that's been successful. And we really don't need to move into this experiential space. However, I think the paradigm shift is that, if you think about people talking about retail, with Toys R Us failing and Best Buy being in trouble for a long time and all of these stories, Blockbuster, getting killed by Netflix, we've seen this idea that cloud is going to trump physical for a long time, but physical has not died. And the reason physical hasn't died is because cloud will provide a utility. I can buy something online, right?
Mm-hmm.
But cloud doesn't provide a physical experience as far as engaging senses, eyes, ears, smell, feel, interaction with other people. And one of the great pieces of literature that I love on this is actually done by Gensler. It's called the Experience Index. And I don't know if you've ever
Mm-hmm.
seen it, but it's a great document. And it talks about all the other motivations people have when they do something like shopping. Like they want to explore, they want to have some happenstance interaction with other people, they want to do some people watching. The reason people go to the mall isn't to buy a shirt. You go to Amazon to buy a shirt, but you go to the mall to do some other things. And so we have this innate human desire to engage all these other senses we have besides our eyes and our ears on a keyboard. And so really starting to connect the dots with that, because what's happening now is people are saying, well, the office could be dead, right? Well,
Mm-hmm.
Why hasn't the office completely died? Why is Apple saying everybody's going to come back? April 11th, I think is what they're saying now, right? They're going to try to get everybody back at Apple.
Mm-hmm.
Why are companies still feeling like they need to have physical space? And it's because a lot of the people still want some of that interaction. But this is the thing. If I create the same experience that I had before, and I say, now you need to leave your house and go do this again, there's no difference in what you're doing from your home to the office. I just want you to sit here and do it instead of sit there. That is never going to work. Everyone is going to ask why, because we've now had a taste of being able to actually be productive and work from a space that's ours. And so now what we need to do is experiential has become super important because every space needs to now have a why. Why am I going to go there and do that? What is that space actually going to facilitate that I don't get sitting at my dining room table where I'm sitting right now in my home? And if we're not starting to think about, it's like the Simon Sinek thing, right? Like start with why. Like if we're not starting with that, like what is the outcome that I want to generate by getting 6 people in this room physically together? And how do I design a space that best accomplishes that goal? And that requires knowing a lot about how people work. That requires a lot of the things that people have been talking about for experiential for a long time. Like if you're in a collaboration space, high chairs where you perch that can will actually push you into motion and keep you creative. If you put somebody on a couch sitting low, they'll go into a critical and analytical phase and you won't get brainstorming. You'll get them just shooting down ideas, right? So thinking about stuff, and that comes from Stanford's design thinking kind of experiments that they did, right? Like we know certain environments create certain physiological states within people, and that movement inspires creativity. So how do we create spaces that inspire more movement, that inspire more interaction, that create more collisions, that do all these things that before seemed like fluffy work speak? But now if we're going to get people together, that's the reason to get people together. The reason to get them in the office isn't to get them on their computer for 6 hours typing on the keyboard. You can do that at home. So I think this is an exciting time because really what we have is this. We have 2 completely different paradigms to compare to each other. We have the pre-pandemic paradigm of this is how we used to do work and this is what we used to get out of it. We have the last 2 years to say this is how we've been working and this is what we've been getting out of it. And then you look at them and say, what do we want to keep from both and where are the gaps that we want to bridge? right? Like, what were the great advantages? Let's keep all the great stuff about remote, that employee morale, less travel time. These people can live in flexible places. We can get more diverse employees. We can get people from different areas that maybe we couldn't get before. Those are all great things. How do we keep that and then get some of these advantages of getting people together in the same room and then create a space that allows that to happen, right? So I just think we've got this huge green field of opportunity, whether it's education, whether it's corporate, whether it's retail, to say, we've seen both. We know neither are perfect. So how do we create kind of the best combination of the two?
Yeah, so many insights there to synthesize. I mean, it's just a tremendous answer. And it reminds me of something that Kay Sargent said in a recent cover story. You know, she's from HOK, of course. And she was talking about the fact that people, in a lot of cases, do want to get back to these communal environments. As you say, I mean, we've had 2 years of greater or lesser extensive isolation due to COVID, and people are craving that kind of that interaction, that peer, sitting around the water cooler or being in a communal space and just getting to know your coworkers on a one-to-one level. But as you say, you don't want to go to an office and commute an hour each way potentially just to sit at a desk in a cubicle and type. That's not stimulating. You might as well be at home in that case. So it really does need to be rethought entirely. It's not a matter of getting rid of the physical office. It's a matter of reimagining it and making it a more communal, more creative space. So let me move to the next question now. And the next question is, one component of experiential is having top-notch content. Content's a really critical part of any kind of an application, of course. That also has been a pain point, though, because many integrators don't perceive themselves as being content specialists. And a lot of clients also don't perceive themselves as being content specialists. They don't have in-house content shops that can generate that kind of material that can give them, a wonderment for whether it's their clients, their employees, whatever the case is. They don't have the kind of in-house shop that can deliver that kind of wonderment. What is the content riddle solution? How do you get to that idea of stirring amazement with your content? What role do integrators play?
So I think this is a great question. And I think, we all know that the ROI of a technology system really comes down to content, right? Because if we can't get people's attention, we can't get their eyes and ears on the technology that we've installed, there's really no purpose for the technology to be there. And I've said this for a long time. I mean, we have a 3-inch screen in our pocket with whatever content we want to consume. So if I come into a lobby, I'm no longer obligated to stare at a 3x3 video wall that sits across from me. I may sit down and get right back into my email, do all my things. But that's a bad thing for a company, because what you've done is you've created a situation where you haven't engaged someone when they come in and started to pull them into your ecosystem or into that meeting, right? And so what you really have to do, content's so important in that you have to give somebody a reason to ingest, digest, absorb any of that content that's there. We know that, like you said, the ecosystem has typically been that integrator says, well, I don't have the ability to create content. And the customer says, well, we have some marketing assets, or we could put our website up on the touch screen or whatever, right? And then
Absolutely.
the content kind of falls flat. Partnership is really the best answer if you don't have the in-house resources to do content yourself. And a lot of times, you don't want to do that. Like, I know in our group, we partner a lot with content companies whose specialty is storytelling, creating insights, trying to figure out how to create outcomes out of those insights, and then creating some type of interactive user interface, content, video delivery, whatever that happens to be, that actually then accomplishes those goals. Now, the interplay in partnership is having a strong relationship with those folks, because let's say you're building an LED wall, for instance, right? And you're going to deliver your content on that LED wall. Well, knowing the pixel counts and the refresh rates and what the LED wall actually does can help you coach the content person on what content's going to look best on the actual technology that's going into the space, right? Or if you're doing something that's tiled LCD walls, knowing that those bezels are there, telling the content person, hey, we're going to have these bezels. They're, less than 1 millimeter wide. They're not really big, but if we really want to minimize those anymore, then maybe we want to do darker backgrounds instead of lighter backgrounds to make those bezels disappear, or things like that, right? So I think as a technology partner, we have a huge role in helping the content people get the content in that kind of ideal space and shape so that it shows best on the technology. But partnership has been a huge a huge piece there for us. And I know for most integrators, when I've written in before about bringing content in-house, most of the comments on the pieces I write about that are, we partner for that. And I think that's been a solution that's worked really, really well. I think the only problem I've seen is that when technology is then still brought in at the end, like the content people, the architect, the customer have all been working. And at the end, they say, well, now we need a screen to put all this stuff up on. That's when then the vision of the space kind of starts to fall flat, because the technology was never really considered in tandem with the content when it was created. And I think that's where I've seen kind of like a misstep in that. So early partnership, I guess I'll add that word early partnership is really probably the best way to do that. And then, like I said, I mean, a system with great content is just huge. I'm trying to think of one that I really, really, really loved. There's a bunch of stuff out there that I've seen and love, but I saw one the other day that had a lobby, and instead of just like the waterfall, which was great, when Salesforce had the waterfall and the paper and all those things that are in there, the lit paper that look like canyons, it's all beautiful content. But then it seemed like every application after that was a waterfall going over the elevators. Like every building copied that Salesforce prototype, right? And then all of a sudden the waterfall over the elevator is really not that cool. Oh yeah, I've seen that like 6 times. Like that's not that cool anymore. It doesn't even get your attention. You just walk by it. When I saw the other day, some people did some like motion capture with dancers, and then use that motion capture to actually create like these dust clouds. So you kind of had these amorphous clouds of like, almost like Color Run, where they do like the blue chalk or the red chalk, and this chalk would move, and every once in a while you'd see that it's in the form of a person, but then it would kind of dissolve back into something else and move into another place. And it was almost a dance of colorful particles that went in and out of human form. And I'm like, now I would stand and watch that for a while, right? Like that would catch my attention. And so the idea is, how do we create, with content, how do we create a state of mind that gets people in the place where, especially in a business, if I come into a lobby, how do I keep people's attention out of their email and out of their phone, right? Like, I don't want them thinking about the 7 things they have to do once they leave my meeting. I want their mindset to be, when I come in here, I capture their attention. They learn a little bit about the company. Maybe they touch something and something in the space triggers, and now they're intrigued about what's going on. And we're creating some type of anticipation and foreshadowing for the hour meeting that we're going to have, to try to see if we have a partnership. And that whole thing actually draws people in to that deeper as they move through, as opposed to being, these little one-off punches. So, like I said, that early partnership with content people can make sure that you not only, get the one experience right, but then how do we make sure that that journey through the building, through the space, through wherever you're at, is cohesive and kind of builds up to that climax, to where there's the call to action and people actually do what you want them to do.
I think that's a really important thing to emphasize, because I think some integrators do think, well, I'm not a content specialist. It's not something I know about. And then the client says, well, I'm not a content specialist. But even if you're not, you can, as you say, partner with someone who is, and have that be part of your offering right from the outset, where it's not like you need to come up with an ad hoc solution every single time and say, well, who can I partner with on content? If you have existing relationships, then you can kind of come as a collective unit to the client and say, I have the technical expertise. My partner, who I've worked with a dozen or more times, has the content expertise, and we collectively can give you an experiential result that's going to make you really, really happy. So that's a much more powerful value proposition, I would think.
Yeah. And, I think it's funny. Like I always think of myself, and, maybe I always say sometimes maybe it may be a bad salesperson, right? Like I never thought about maximizing sale. My job was always to be a good steward. I need to be a good steward of my client's investment. And there were many times when we would come to a point where they were like, well, we'd like to do the technology, but we don't really have content, or, we're not really going to invest in content. We're just going to do this instead. And I would outright say, like, I would be a bad steward of your money if I took your money for the technology, because I know you're not going to get a return on it. Like without the rest, there is no reason to have it. Right? Like I can sell you screens, but I'm not adding value to you by doing that.
Right.
And, if you spent 50%, let's say you had a budget and you spent 75%, you spent 75% and got 0, or you spent 100 and got 90.
Mhm.
Spending more and getting something is better than spending within your budget and getting zero return on it, right? So like I always had to try to talk to people about, yeah, we can spend $50,000 and get no impact, or we could spend 100 and get everything you're looking for. Like,
Mhm.
what's better? Like, yes, the 50 is within your budget, but it's not going to provide any of the result that you want. So you might as well spend zero instead of 50. Spend
Mhm.
zero and get zero. Like dollar for dollar impact, spend the zero.
Yeah.
Right? Like people look at me crazy when I say that, but like when you come to that point, it's like if you're really trying to create an experience, the content has to be there. And if you know it's not going to fulfill, you're not being a good steward of your client's money to just sell them stuff that you know is never going to actually reach the outcome that they want. And so, maybe that makes me a bad business development or salesperson, but I've always tried to put myself in the other person's shoes and say, well, like if I was spending this money, what am I trying to get out of it, and am I going to get it with that? So, anyways.
So we talked about content, pretty thoroughly. Let's think about some of the other managed services that might be entailed within experiential AV, because as you know, and I know you've had a history with Commercial Integrator as well, we've really been beating the drum for a number of years on recurring monthly revenue and finding ways to generate business that is not centered on necessarily just installing boxes and pulling cable and things of that nature. So other than content and content partnerships, how else can recurring monthly revenue be generated as a result of the experiential revolution?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, content's obvious a way to do that. Content does need to be refreshed. I'd just make a point to say that if you've invested in a technology experience, you should have some type of, refresh cycle on your content, right? In order to make that fresh and new and contextual. I remember World of Color at Disney. It was one of those really cool things where, they have the light show in the water, but they also do a lot of projection mapping on the actual roller coasters and rides and things in the background of that. And so like when Tron would come out, all of a sudden the roller coaster in the back would go into Tron blue, and the cars would be racing across the background of the landscape of the theme park while the lights were doing other things. And then they show clips from the movie on the water screen. So being able to do things where your technology can be used contextually based on what's going on, and having some type of content refresh for that. Obviously, there's a recurring monthly revenue in doing that. On the other side, these systems are shows, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in a way, if you create this new space in a corporate office, or you create some of the great projects I've been seeing are in hospitals right now, where hospitals really they're putting hospitality back into hospital, right? Like they're extending that piece and trying to create ethos within a hospital. Like if you're a cancer center, how do you make something hopeful? Right. There's one here in Orange County that's a children's hospital where every floor is something different. When the child checks into the hospital, they get a book and it says they've been injured fighting the dragon and they've escaped to the castle to recover. And every part of their journey, when they go to the forest floor to have an x-ray, like that's part of some journey that they did and on their way to recovery and redemption before they get to go back to their homeland, right? Like
Wow.
every one of those things is added into the story and added into the book as you go through, and it makes this a sterile, confusing, scary experience of being in a hospital, this story, and it's your hero's epic almost when you leave, right? But if the system is down when that kid goes to floor 2, and it's not like the forest and he goes through the white hall instead of the projection mapped hallway, what does that do to the story? Does that pull you out? Right. And then what is the loss? Like if your child, what's the loss in your morale and your push and keeping your spirits up? Because we know that's a great part of a healthy recovery is mindset. If you're an employee or if you're a customer, I used to tell people all the time, they're like, if the conference room goes down, we go to another room. Okay, well, what if you have a client in here who's looking to spend $6 million and the room goes down? Do you want to move them to another room? Like, this is revenue generating space. Like if that meeting doesn't go well, you lose a $6 million deal. and you're worried about saving $50 or $250 a month on a service contract in this room when you could lose $6 million if something doesn't go right in here, right? So just kind of reframing things for people. These systems in the way that we're using them now, if we're using them as a customer experience center, if we're using them as a way to increase employee retention during the Great Resignation, right? Or to attract top talent to your company because now you can hire people from anywhere. Or if you're doing it to create a mindset, or if you're doing it to create an art experience in a mall that has fingers into retail experiences that all kind of cohesively go together within that space. What is the impact of a failure? You know, it's just like a concert. If the screen and the music goes off, it's a fail, right? And so when we're creating these spaces that are based on experience, that are based on the subjective feelings that you give somebody's through their eyes, ears, taste, smell, touch, whatever, if it's not on, it's all for naught. And so, you know, this idea of service contracts to make sure things are always on, of cloud-based monitoring, of all these things we've been talking about, right? Proactive health checks and all of those things become, I guess, increasingly more important, because that digital and analog world that we're building that blurs things together, if half of it's not on, none of it works. So.
Well, we've been going for about a half hour, and it's just been gold. I really appreciate you taking time to do this, but I would be remiss not to just bring in one other quick question. I did ask you, I think, as I mentioned, to be part of the digital signage deep dive, where you opined on things like LED and technology transitions within the large format category. So I would like to just talk to you briefly about your thoughts on large format display, particularly as it relates to the experiential AV trends we're talking about, animating our imaginations. When I think about, for example, you know, a massive LED video wall in a lobby or in a retail environment or whatever it is, that's the kind of thing that could animate my imagination. We've talked about some applications just in the context of this conversation. So what are your thoughts about digital signage, video walls, large format display as key components of an experiential approach?
I think they get your attention, right? And I think you have to do things I think you have to be smart about it. I don't think you can just put a large rectangle on the wall again and expect somebody to pay attention to it because it's there. But with large format video, you know, immersion is an amazing thing. We can light up different parts of the brain. Like if you think about, I used to have a slide that I love to show people. It was a tiger. It was like this 6 degrees, you know, the 6 degrees of vision that you have, your foveal vision, where your focus is, where you're actually focused. You can see stuff out here, but where your focus is in that 6 degree little window where your eyes are really detailing things out. And it would say where you're focusing, and then all the rest of the space all the way out to your peripheral was the things that can kill you, is what it said, right? So like your eyes, your brain is paying attention to things out here because this is your old predator-prey system in effect. And so immersion works because you start to engage other parts of the brain. Now, you don't want to do it jarringly, that you draw attention away. But if you think of something like engaging peripheral vision, if you had steady waves coming from the side that kept pulsing this way, that were calming and not threatening, but you were always keeping this peripheral vision in play as it was pulling your focus back into the middle, all of a sudden you're engaging more parts of your brain, which means you're going to get more memory, more retention, more call to action later out of a system like that when you're actually immersing somebody into the environment, right? That's why immersive works so well. So I think large format video has a huge play in that, especially in something like LED, because you can do fine pitch in your focal area and you can do higher pixel pitch displays in those side areas that aren't being resolved with focus, but need to create some kind of effect or some kind of peripheral piece that pulls you in. And so I think there are some really creative ways to use things like direct view LED that doesn't necessarily have to be this huge blockbuster budget breaker in order to do it. You know, our eyes see contrast out of the peripheral a lot better than they actually do from the front. I don't know if you've never ever seen this, like at night where you'll catch a star or something in the sky and you'll see it out of the side of your eye and it seems very, very bright. And when you turn to focus on it, it actually dims a little bit. It's actually brighter in your peripheral vision. And it's because your peripheral vision is looking for contrast. Like, I need to see movement and contrast over here. And then I can turn my vision to it and assess of where it's a threat. But all I need is some small data points out here to get me to look over there, right? And so, for me, like when I think about video, I think about all that stuff. I mean, the advantages of direct view LED are great because it's seamless. It doesn't have any interruptions. It's much more immersive, I think, in a lot of ways. You can color calibrate it very well. They don't decay at different rates. Like all those things are great. Which I also think, honestly, long term, I think OLED film, if they could figure out a way to just roll OLED film out on a wall. Right now, it's about 80 inches is all they can get with the electronics on the edges. But LG did those great waves that year at CES with the waterfalls that were coming down and the screens were curved, and then the piece actually curved over the top. So you filled the peripheral top to bottom and left to right, created some organic shapes. I mean, there are a lot of great things you can do with video, and you can obviously do that with direct view LED as well. Like Nanolumens has some great flex product, right? That you can radius down to like a 5-inch radius. I mean, you could curl that thing around a column. So I think there are a lot of great opportunities for immersive and to create organic shapes to engage a peripheral vision. I mean, all of those things are things that I look for opportunities when I'm looking at space. So.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to share all these insights, Mark. If there's one thing you've guaranteed with this podcast, it's that I will be bugging you in your inbox for appearances on future podcasts. So thank you for being here. For those who want to connect with you or connect with XTG, how would they go about doing that?
They can go and find me on Twitter. That's usually the place that I'm, interacting the most on social. I'm at AV Phenom on Twitter. Or they can connect me on LinkedIn. Mark Coxon on LinkedIn is a great place. Or they can go to AVI-SPL, their XTG site, and they can look up the Experience Technology Group on XTG site as well.
Well, thank you again, Mark, for being on the AV Plus podcast. So happy to have been joined by Mark Coxon, who is Business Development Director with XTG. My name is Dan Ferrisi, Editor-in-Chief with Commercial Integrator, and we'll be back very soon with more great conversations. Once again, Mark, thank you.